I'm so excited to talk about it. As we go along, we're going to get into not only our reviews for the movie with our personal rating system, but also we'll talk about some of the differences between the movie and reality.
It's a sports movie, it's an action movie, but it's not driven by that. It's driven by the family dynamics, the relationship. A lot of the things that happen in the movie are true. A lot of things maybe were expanded on or even brought down a little bit, tamed a little bit. It's a surprise.
Oh,
You didn't even know that this was coming,
what is it?
but there's a gift for you. At the very end, Andrew and I have a wrestling match that we're going to be doing. Welcome to Backseat Directing.
Where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew,
and Aaron.
we put out new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're doing a movie review on The Iron Claw.
3, 2, 1, action.
All right, the elephant in the room, Zac Efron is huge in The Iron Claw.
Honestly, you didn't get to it fast enough. Zac Efron's gigantic. He looks so good. Yeah, he's a behemoth, and I like these. Looking into the Von Erich family in real life, like they were built like Mack trucks.
Yeah.
Like, pretty much all of them.
What a crazy family to have. Is it 6 boys, 5 boys?
6 boys. Yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah. I mean,
And to have a dad like they did.
yeah. The chances to have that many boys.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, they fostered a really big idea of family and brotherhood, and not just a love for each other, but the sport of wrestling too, all intertwined into one. We're going to get into today this crazy story that this movie is based off of, this true story that occurred in I think the 70s and 80s, but primarily in the 80s, I believe, because their rise to stardom is like 84 to 87, 89.
Yep.
So the in the world, like the old classic days of wrestling, back when there was the NWA and the WCCW, we're gonna get
Bunch of different federations. Yeah.
when it was all split up. We're gonna get into this family's story with some tragedy, with beautiful stories too of love and perseverance and resilience. I'm so excited to talk about it. As we go along, we're going to get into not only our reviews for the movie with our personal rating system, but also we'll talk about some of the differences between the movie and reality. And we'll also talk about, what else did I have here? I have the true story of the brothers, individual brothers' passings, of the Von Erich curse.
Yeah, the comparison between the movie and real life. Like, you wouldn't even believe that this was a real life story if their real life wasn't documented as heavily as it was, because they're in the limelight, they're on TV, they're selling out venues, shows, so it's crazy that the events that happened. And a lot of times when a story is based on true story in Hollywood, Hollywood puts the flair on it, spices it up. But it was kind of the opposite with this one. They pulled back on some things,
Because this true story is so
too
harrowing.
much. Yeah. Which, how often does that happen? Or even Hollywood's like, probably shouldn't add that in.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it, but before we start off, I do want to thank anyone who clicked on this video. Thank you so much. Hopefully you stick along for this ride for us as we go kind of into this story, this real life story, and into the movie as well.
At the very end of this episode, so you guys stay all the way to the end. At the very end, Andrew and I have a wrestling match that we're going to be doing. Right here on this table.
Aaron's coming for the belt. I've been holding on to it for a while now. Right here on this table. But yeah, is there anything else that we want to get into before we dive right into the show?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this show with a friend. But before we kind of go in, I have one other thing that I want to show you. It's a surprise.
Oh,
You didn't even know that this was coming,
what is it?
but there's a gift for you, if you will. And I wanted to show you live on air
What is it?
so we can get your live reaction. Take a look at this.
Whoa!
Oh! Take a look at that.
Oh my gosh. So for our
Tilt it
audio,
forward just a little bit.
for our few
Yeah.
audio listeners that are out there, Aaron has presented me with a full-size poster that he designed for our short film that is in the works, The Body. And Aaron designed this amazing poster and now has it printed in full format for us to decorate the
Boom.
podcast set with.
But that's not it. You get your own poster to go
Oh
home with.
my goodness.
Now, I can't take full credit for this gift because one of our loyal listeners and followers, Jay, paid for both of these to be printed
Really?
for us. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jay.
So Jay and I kept it a secret from you to give you a little surprise.
That is too cool.
But yeah, so we got one for the podcast studio, and then Andrew has a nerd room at his house that you can also hang up the poster.
That is stunningly beautiful. Thank you so much, Jay, and thank you, Aaron, for
That's
collaborating in this surprise. That is just so cool.
Yeah, Jay, I've already said thank you to you, but yeah, thanks, man. I'm really excited to have this. It's our first short film. Hopefully, be done here soon. I actually got it behind me right now on the computer, finishing up some color and whatnot. But yeah, that poster is like, there's a lot of hard work that went into that movie, and I'm excited that we got something to represent that, and we each do in both of our houses. So that's cool.
I'm pumped. I feel like it's like Christmas morning. As a gift I didn't know I needed. That's so cool.
Yeah. All right. Into the movie of the day, and that is The Iron Claw. Like we said, this movie is based on true events from pioneers in the wrestling world. This family, the Von Erichs, like they set the way, and this movie follows their story, but more obviously the tragedy that surrounds their family, which is, again, wild. This movie came out last year, 2023. It's rated R, 2 hours and 12 minutes long. It's got an IMDb rating of an 8.1 out of 10. Solid numbers. And then Rotten Tomatoes, both high scores, with the critics having an 88% with 193 reviews. And then the audience even higher at 93% with over 1,000 reviews. So pretty much everyone who's seen this movie has enjoyed the movie. And I'm right in that same boat. I had a lot of fun with this movie. First thoughts was it was unexpected to me because I didn't know much about their real story. I've kind of heard about their name, but I didn't know about all of the tragedy that went along with the name, which was kind of cool to watch on screen, for the first time, rather than just kind of hearing about it on the side,
That's exactly what I was going to say. And from here on out, we will get into spoiling the movie, so that you've been warned, spoiler warning. But I would definitely recommend going into this movie if you don't already know the true story of the Von Erichs. Go into it that way. And if you want to look at the real life story and see comparisons, it is mostly accurate. But if you want to look at that, look at it afterwards, because the twists and turns in this movie are just phenomenal. And not knowing that story, I think, made it
elevated it for me.
Yeah, for me too. It made it such a exciting experience, and not even exciting might not even be the right connotation of a word because it's a harrowing story. But the twists and turns, it's gripping, is what it is. It's like a gripping thriller of a movie.
Absolutely.
And I really enjoyed it as well.
So this is an A24 movie. It had a budget of $15 million, which sounds about right, but still pretty low for movies that are coming out in today's age.
Yeah, cheap for today's.
The box office didn't bring in as much as I was thinking in my head before I looked up the numbers. It brought in $27.5 million. So it's just shy of doubling its budget, which pretty good.
Yeah, it's still in theaters.
Yeah, it's a profitable movie, I would say. But I was expecting it to be a little closer to the 100. But maybe I'm just kind of skewed because we do cover a lot of big blockbuster movies on this show, So
in my mind, it should be getting some award season recognition too. And I mean, that's another angle to look at for movie success. And
for sure,
the studio looks at it through that lens too, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said, $15 million is pretty small for a Hollywood film, So to make more than that is a success, Now we're going to go into our creators segment where we talk about the creators in front of, but also behind the camera. Because there's a lot of people, man, that go into making a movie. It's ridiculous. It's crazy that movies can even be made because of all the moving parts that are involved and how much collaboration is needed between everyone doing their job, but also working together to make the product the best that it can be. So Andrew's going to take it away from here.
Yeah, so it's they were talking about this at the Golden Globes too. It's inherently a collaborative medium. So the people that were involved behind the camera is usually like where we like to start. So something we always love was when the director writes the movie, and in this case, that was Sean Durkin as both the director and writer for this film. Did a phenomenal job translating the story from real life and then executing that vision onto the screen from the script afterwards. The cinematographer, I hope I'm pronouncing this name right. I believe it's Matthias Hanem, and then music is by Richard Reed Perry, and the editor is I'm sorry, the cinematographer is Matthias Erdely, and the editor is Matthew Hanem. That's
Okay.
why that felt wrong. Then our cast in front of the camera, you know him, you love him. Zac Efron is Kevin Von Erich. The next about 5 names that you'll hear are all Von Erichs. Harris Dickinson is the brother David. Jeremy Allen White is Carrie. Stanley Simmons as Mike. Holt McCallany as Fritz. Maura Tierney as Doris. And Lily James as Pam. And if you were wondering why the dad who plays Fritz looks familiar, he's in a few things that made him look familiar to me. He's in Mindhunter, the Netflix original series that was created by David Fincher. And then he's also has a really small role in Justice League. He plays like a random criminal that Batman detains. But he's probably in other stuff too, but that's where I recognized him from.
Yeah, so you normally right around here we talk about which characters kind of stole the show for us, which was our favorite. Uh, Obviously Zac Efron did a fantastic job in this movie, but I was captivated every time the dad was on the screen.
He did a really good job.
Like he really sold it, of like how much he values wrestling and how much he values his sons being good at wrestling,
Yeah.
almost more than, if not actually more than how much he values his sons in general. Like we see a shot in the very beginning of the film where he's ranking his sons and favorites.
Carrie is my favorite,
Yeah.
followed by Kevin, then David, then Mike, and that can change at any time.
Yeah, and that's crazy, right? Like, but I've watched an interview too with the real life Kevin, and he was saying, yeah, like that's kind of just how like dads were back then. Like it wasn't even like unique to our family necessarily, but that's definitely a wild thought in today's climate. Yeah.
As Kevin didn't seem, in my opinion, to hold a lot of or really any ill will towards his father. Looking at interviews with him, the real life Kevin Von Erich seemed like he had respect and admiration for his father. I heard him call him like a great moral man and all these positive things about him. Whereas the movie obviously shows a lot of contention between the two of them.
Yeah, it's tough because I mean it's your dad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like he's pushing you to do and your brothers to almost go past the breaking point a few times,
It's hard to know the details of what's true, and that's what I was running into, like doing my source code segment for this, because a lot of times you'll see, it seems like a lot of the world thinks that so and so did this, whether it be Fritz. A lot of people thinking that he pushed people to do things that push Mike to wrestle when he didn't want to, or this and that. And then there's other accounts of people saying that, you know, the dad wasn't, somebody else was doing this, or that maybe they say the dad pushed Carrie to hide his amputated leg, but other accounts say that Carrie is the one who wanted to hide it. It's hard to know with these real life stories. Nobody's behind closed doors besides this actual family. So to some degree,
it's probably a little bit of both, the pressure of the dad, but then the kids, the sons, the brothers wanting to do what the dad wants on their own will, just because they want his approval. They want him to be proud of him, like, yes, they're being pushed to do wrestling, but I think at the same time they all wanted to be involved in wrestling. At least that's what it seemed like from interviews and
it would be hard not to, wouldn't it? Like growing up in that family, it'd be hard not to, because
it's just the pastime. It seemed like it's like instead of throwing football on Sundays, they're in the wrestling ring. Like it's just kind of what their family seemed to have done.
And their dad, who is their hero, they grow up watching him wrestling on television. Like it's kind of hard not to try like fall down that path, especially as each brother does it. The next brother, I feel like, is
Yeah,
more inclined, right?
exactly. Another actor that I really enjoyed watching on screen was Harris Dickinson as David Von Erich. I feel like he sold the wrestling scenes really well. I mean, he was the tallest of the boys out there wrestling, you know, and he just
He's 6'2".
yeah, and he was really good on the mic too, you know, like, and even the brothers in the show and the movie are like, you know, like, why'd you take that from me? Why'd you speak for me? Kind of thing. And like he knocked it out of the park, and his dad even said he did, you know, and I think he did a great job of, you know, portraying that
Yeah. It
presence.
was interesting seeing Zac Efron in this role as the kind of more sheepish brother,
Yeah.
because like I feel like you never see Zac Efron like that. It's always like these
He's
cocky,
always the
outspoken
alpha.
characters,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's Neighbors, Greatest Showman, High School Musical, whatever. I mean, he might have his struggles, but he's always very skilled and confident in when he's doing whatever he's doing. So it was
Yeah.
interesting to see this more like tempered approach where he like his voice is a little bit more like guarded and reserved. I guess he's like a little quieter, but
Yeah.
he's still like is very much physically, athletically impressive. And that's kind of what they said in that Vice documentary that we watched, is that Kevin was the most athletically talented probably of the brothers.
Yep.
And I think they said Kerry was the most entertaining and David was the most talented wrestler.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Kerry was huge, by the way. Kerry was the biggest brother.
Yeah.
And just a hulking, well, I think David might have been the tallest, but
Yeah.
Kerry's by far the most muscular and heaviest brother.
Yeah. I saw some real clips of them in that documentary on Vice YouTube channel. And yeah, they were all stacked in real life. But let's kind of move into our ratings. This is where we break down movies by 6 different categories to help us give a constructive rating of the movie. The first of which is the story. We think this is the most important part of a movie. If everything else is a perfect 10, but the story is a 5, it's not going to be a very memorable movie. So, Andrew, for the story, out of 10 points, what'd you give it?
I gave it an 8.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
I did as well.
Are we gonna do the perfect game this time?
We haven't yet. We haven't yet. I don't know. We'll see.
So why did you give it an 8?
I gave it an 8 because I was captivated the whole time. It's a sports movie. It's an action movie, but it's not driven by that. It's driven by the family dynamics, the relationships.
Family.
And they used the action of the wrestling and the training and all of that as story beats to move the story forward. You know, like they didn't just go and wrestle to go and wrestle, you know, like they went and wrestled in parallel to what's going on in the story. And I thought that was really well balanced. And then the fact that it actually happened, and I feel like they adapted it really well. And we'll talk about like what they changed and stuff. But yeah, I was captured the whole time. I actually saw this in the theaters by myself, which when I watch movies by myself, I tend to drift off. You know, I'm an old man, I'll admit it. But I did not fall asleep during this movie at all.
I would have been so mad at you.
And I wasn't close to falling asleep either.
I
was engaged. I had a Pop-Tart, you know, and just snacking on that throughout the movie. Had my water, you know, and stared at Zac Efron's abs the whole time.
I went and saw this movie with my fiance, who this is not usually her kind of movie. She's not a big
Yeah, Andrew ditched me.
drama fan. But
My movie date left me.
I had the chance to go see it, and I went to go see it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And quickly put it into my top 3 favorite movies of 2023. And then I was pushing Aaron to go see it from there.
I'm glad I did see it. I just wanted to see it with someone. I enjoy movies more when I watch them with other people.
I'm glad you went too,
yeah.
especially because now we can cover it. And seeing it in theaters is just the best way to see a movie, obviously. But I gave the story an 8 out of 10 because, like you said, I thought they did a great job adapting it, adapting the real life story. And I think it's all kind of laid out very well in the scene between Lily James and Zac Efron when they're eating ribs in that restaurant. And she's like, "What do you want?" He's like, "I want to be world champion." And she's like, "Is that all you want?" And he says, "Well, I want to be with my brothers. I want to be with my family." And I was like, that's a good depiction of what the movie as a whole is, because the movie, like you said, it's about wrestling, but it's really about family.
Yeah.
And man, it's an inspiring true story in a way, even with how devastating and sad it is, and how hard it would be to watch again because of the emotionality.
Dude, it's literally like, whoop, dodged a bullet there, not crying. And then something else happens. It's like, whoop,
Dude,
that one's a little closer. And then the third one comes by and you're like, whoop, starting to get to me. And then Zac Efron's like, I used to have 5 brothers.
Oh my God, dude!
And now I'm not even a brother.
Why are you crying?
Like,
why are you crying, Dad? Why are you crying, Dad?
Because it got me, man. It got me.
Because I used to be a brother. Oh my God, dude! I literally cried.
Dude, in the theater by myself. I'm like, son of a gun, man. It's like, I'm just.
But my fiance turned over to me at the end of the movie, just tears running down my face. But like, it was like a good kind of cry too, because like the moment when I did cry was like this like emotionally cathartic part in the movie.
Yeah.
That's why I give the story such a high score on this category, is because the ending to me was so good. One of the best movie endings I've seen in a while. Like, can you name a better movie ending from last year?
It was solid.
That's my favorite movie ending.
And like we said, like there's tragedy. Spoiler: all the brothers died. And then at the end, like, yeah, you're really sad, and the deaths were very impactful. But then that moment where this stoic character is breaking down in front of his children, and then the children come up and they're like, "What's wrong, Daddy?" And then I really liked how the kid said, "Do you want to talk about it, or can you tell me how you feel?" Or he said something like that. It was a very good answer of.
These kids were acting their ass off too.
Dude,
those kids were so good.
Yeah, it was a very good question for someone who's like going through these feelings that maybe they don't even know how to interpret. And I'm like, man, like that was very deep for this 8-year-old kid.
They were mature. Like those kids. They're awesome. The way he was like, he's like, you shouldn't see me like this, and the kid says something like, "Well, we cry all the time, Dad."
Yeah, does that make us not a man?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with crying, and it's like when you look at it through like,
I'm looking at everyone else in the theater, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with crying.
Stop staring.
Yeah.
Why is that guy crying so loud? Shut up.
Just watch the movie.
But yeah, dude, I was bawling, and credit to Zac Efron's performance. Like you said, delivers such a good performance in this movie. But to me, the story's so good because of the end. The end pulls it together so well in what could otherwise just be like pure sadness and devastation. I was talking to a friend about this actually today, because I watched a movie called Talk to Me. It also came out last year. It's a A24 movie, takes place in Australia, a horror movie. And I was like, this movie's just that kind of movie where like bad things happen, and it's just worse and worse. But like, there's no like emotional payoff. And to me, it's like Iron Claw was such the opposite, where it's like bad things happen and then you have this emotional payoff. That end scene when the brother's riding on the boat, and did you notice that there's the quarter next to him, and it's facing I believe heads up, and that's what Fritz said earlier when they both had a chance to go in the ring against Ric Flair and chance at the title. He said, heads, it's going to be Kevin's turn. Tails, it's going to be your turn, Kerry. So he sits on the boat heading towards his other brothers who have passed away, with the coins sitting up, indicating that it is now Kevin's turn. Like, the brothers have passed on, but it's Kevin's turn. Kevin, like, oh my God, that was, and he gets off the boat and he reunites with all his brother, including the youngest brother, Jack Jr.
And he's like, I haven't met you yet. It's like, oh
my God, dude. But it's like so much tragedy, and they've all different brothers have their battles with depression or like crazy accidents, and now they're reunited, they're back in their brotherhood, and even though they've all passed away, there's like this beautiful uplifting message at the end that like they're together. And that's such a good way, I think, to look at the world, but also for Kevin to get to look at it, because that guy has had to go through so much. And like in the Vice documentary that we looked at, his outlook is just so positive. He's like, yeah, I don't want you to feel bad for me. Like, I'm such a blessed guy. I'm the most blessed guy in the world. And he has this beautiful family now. Like, dude, dude deserves to be happy. He's had to go through so much. So for that to be displayed as the ending, the brothers being united, so cathartic and emotional. And then to cut back to Kevin, like with his sons, the line that took me out was when his sons said, "We'll be your brothers, Dad." I was like, oh my God. No, it's like, yeah, we'll be your brother, Dad. Oh, I've been saying that since the movie came out, and this movie has really stuck with me. Like, I mean, everybody like has loss in their life, and everybody has, we lose family members, we have difficulties with families, losing family or friends, and like, and for those little kids to say that, it's like, You know, you have chosen brothers, like you
Hmm.
have. Well, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
I
man,
love it.
it was
Made me
great.
feel really good, even when I was
Hmm.
crying. Like I felt like inspired by this story that could be
Yeah,
seen as negative.
yeah, you left like hopeful and happy, and rather than just devastated.
Yeah,
You know, like you said, that other movie, just bad thing after bad thing happened just to happen. Like,
yeah,
but this, there's like a message, there's a
yeah.
payoff. You know, like you can get through it, kind of thing. So
Man,
story stellar.
I feel happy just thinking about like
Yeah.
the because how do they do such a beautiful thing with that with like turning something on its head? You
Hmm.
know, turning this terrible thing
Yeah,
into
like how do you make the story of five brothers dying a good one? You know, that isn't just sad the entire time or depressing the entire time. You know, like you're not leaving the theater depressed. Like if we left the theater depressing, like it wouldn't stick with us as long.
yeah.
You know. All right, let's move on. This very close to this category, and the next category is acting. This is also out of 10 points. We've talked a lot about the performances that we've enjoyed so far, so now it's time to put a very valuable number on this, you know, because our opinion matters most when it comes to these kind of movies. So the audience is waiting, Andrew. What did you give the acting for the Iron Claw?
Did we get the same thing? Let's find out. I gave it an 8.5.
Oh, I gave it an 8.
Dang, we're so
Yeah,
close.
we've yet to have a movie with the same score. One day it'll
The
happen.
chances are so slim.
It's got to be on like a crappy movie where everything's like a 1 or something, or a fantastic movie where everything's
Everything's
a
a
10,
10.
which hasn't happened yet. So, yeah,
Just wait
8.
till Despicable Me 4 comes out.
Yeah, I'm giving that a 0. Don't even go watch it, guys.
You can try all you want. So you gave it an 8. I gave it an 8.5. Great scores. I gave it an 8.5 because I just feel like everybody delivered. Like everybody, Lily James, Maura
Absolutely.
Tierney. Lily James had obviously a lot less lines to deliver in this movie than someone like Zac Efron. But then I feel like every scene she was in, she did such an incredible job. I mean, when she comes to get the mom out of the room before she has to go
Mm,
to the funeral
subtle.
of like her
It's
second
subtle.
son.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Uh, Also, Zac Efron did a really good job of pretending like he wasn't acting or couldn't act. You know, like when he was doing the press
Yeah.
conferences and stuff, and Kevin was known to not be as good on the microphone. You know, like
It felt awkward. You
he
know,
was
you felt like
awkward, and
secondhand
yeah, and it was
embarrassment.
and it felt so real that like he was actually awkward. But it's like I feel like it's really hard to act as if you're acting. You know,
Yeah.
because it's like it's double.
And you
You
want the
know, and
audience to be
it's
able to tell that.
right.
Like you want them to see you in one scene and not think you're acting, and then
Right.
see you in another scene and think you're acting.
Like it
It's a
can't
hard
be
thing to
so
do.
bad that it's just bad.
Yeah.
You know? Like it's got to be like a good balance, and then also they all did a fantastic job actually being in the ring, you
The
know,
physicality. That's why I gave it the extra point
that
five.
goes
Yeah.
into acting, you know, is like being able to sell the stunts, like even if it's not the actors themselves, since the stunt coordinators and stuntmen doing the work, like how well does it sell? How believable is it? How, you know, like unique is it? How exciting is it? And they did a phenomenal job in all of the training montages, sequences, and then of course while they're in the ring. And if I'm remembering correctly, all of those shots when they're like in the ring, they were actually performing like a 10 to 15 minute like show. And they would do that over and over and film it rather than just filming 1 or 2 shots at a time. Like they actually did the whole thing a
Wow.
few times through. And rather than just doing one off shots, I'm sure they did some one off shots, you know, on some of the harder moves, but they would actually go through the ring and they were asking like one of the stunt coordinators too, like, could Zach Efron like actually work the ring? It's like, well, he did. Like we did 8 to 10, 12 minute rounds, you know, where we're going through this whole planned thing, you know, where he's being a wrestler, you know? So like with a little bit more training, like he definitely could. It's kind of what that guy was saying, you know? And like it was believable on screen, not just from Zach either, but from everyone else.
Yeah, they hired, I believe, professional wrestlers to help with the stunt coordinating for this movie and help train the actors to believably portray wrestlers in the ring. And it's the action sequences in this movie are really cool, you know? Um, the scenes where they're getting thrown out of the ring or jumping off the top rope, I think is the coolest thing for me personally to see. But
It's got to
they
be
sold them
fun
so
to
well.
do, right?
Yeah.
Just jump and land on someone like that.
So the physicality of the performances is incredible, but and some of those slow motion shots, like particularly the one where he's coming off the top rope and the guy jumps and
Hmm.
meets him in the air to where you can see, wow, I mean, it looks amazing, the stunt
Yeah.
work and the shot, but the performances too. Like we talked about the dad a little bit already, McCallany, who played Fritz. He just did such a good job, I think, of playing this kind of like reserved Texas father who had a lot of pride in himself and what he did, and also in his kids, to a point where he was in a way the villain of the story, but he was never acting or being portrayed in a way that was so over the top villainous. You know, it was like you could feel a real fatherly bond, or you could feel like he went out to Carrie and he was like, that something's been taken to you the same way, taken from you the same way that football's been taken from me. He didn't go out there and say like, you're a failure because the Olympics got canceled, which obviously wasn't Carrie's fault, you know?
Hmm.
So I thought that he was portrayed really well as a complex human being of a character, even if he was portrayed, you know, despicable in general sense.
Yeah. Did you notice when that scene that you were just talking about, where they're like all working in the field, and he comes up and he's like, "Football got taken from me," blah blah blah. I think you should try wrestling, and whatnot. Did you notice how like they didn't react? The brothers didn't react at all until the father left. Like
Yeah.
they kind of held it all in and had to be stoic around their father, but then excited
Yeah.
for each other when he left. And it's like a cool little detail.
Yeah, it's like in a way they're definitely scared of their father. Like the way that Kevin approaches the mother, is her name Dorothy? Maura Tierney's character,
Oh yeah, like
Doris.
in the
He
beginning.
approaches her in the beginning and says, "Dad's too tough on Mike. You got to talk to Dad." And she's like, "That's between them." And the family has this whole vibe throughout the movie that it's like approach things head on. That's between you and him. Like, and nobody wants to really like take on the dad in that sense as like the patriarch of the family
Didn't turn out to be a very valuable way to do
approach.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, at least this is from what we saw in the movie. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Our next category, again, we're kind of going right into the next one. We're talking about how beautiful some of the shots were. Our next one includes the shots, and that is cinematography. This category, I feel like, is pretty big. It encompasses a lot of things. We got the camera movement, the composition. We have the like different
Blocking.
lenses. Yeah, the blocking, uh, but also like the special effects, the VFX, color grading, and then editing. So a lot of stuff I
Yeah.
just said goes into this, but basically everything that you see in the way that it's presented to you is in this category. The lighting, you know, um, I gave this an 8 out of 10 as well. So far, I've been eights all across the board. What did you give it?
I gave it a 9 out of 10.
9. Okay. What jumped you from being an 8 to going up to a 9?
For me, it was just really the coloring of the film. Like I don't know, it had a very film like and is that saying right to say analog film? It had a very film style feeling as opposed to digital. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And so
It's very vintage.
yeah, I really liked how well that
Got the trailer playing right now as we're talking about it.
I really like how well they captured the aesthetic of the time period,
Hmm.
and the movie had like an aged feeling to it, and then even the way they captured like footage from that time period, and when something was being videotaped, they would make it look as though it was being recorded on film in the 80s.
Yeah, it looks phenomenal. Like you said, the lighting looks great, especially when they're like in the rink. They they really like contrast the natural lighting of all the other scenes and then the epic lighting in the arena.
I can call to mind too the thing that one of the things that makes me really like the cinematography is I can call to mind certain shots that are just beautiful. Like
Hmm.
specifically remembering that shot that's at the opening of the trailer where he's coming back and forth against the ropes, and like the
Yep.
way the focus is on the rope,
Hmm.
and then the shots of the dad in the opening in black and white, and the shots of the ring in general. Like there's a shot of the empty ring that's in black and white, and it just for some reason looks so stunning to me.
Yeah. No, the cinematography was phenomenal in this movie. One thing that I noticed that stuck out to me was they had this incorporated in their style of holding really long shots without cutting. you know? And I noticed it a few times throughout that in certain scenes, you know, to help portray the weight of the moment, they held one camera angle for a long time. A perfect example is when Zach or Kevin is kind of bouncing against the ropes, like you were just talking about. He does that like what, like 15
Yeah,
times
it's a long
before
shot.
they even switch. But even when they're talking to people, they'll like keep it on the screen of one person and the other person's talking, but they don't cut to them. They stay there. That's the epic shot right there of Kevin jumping off of the ropes. But yeah, it's very well done.
To the shot, another shot that I really liked was the shot through that small window after Zac Efron's match or Kevin's match. He has the ice pack on his back. They
Hmm.
like move up from the door up and look through the window. This like voyeuristic perspective, looking down at the brothers in like their private moment. I don't know. The shot, the shooting style of this movie to me felt really intimate, and I like that because it's
Yeah,
an intimate story.
yeah, it felt intimate and like classic.
Yeah.
You know, is that a good way to
Yeah,
describe
you
it?
said
You know,
vintage before
yeah,
too, like classic vintage. Yeah,
yeah.
it felt aged, which is really nice to
Hmm.
see in new movies because it has like a comfortable feeling. You don't get a lot of like aged movies anymore because everything's new and digital. So
Yeah,
it just has like a homey, natural feeling. Which like this is a family story. The shot too of them sitting together in the stall when David is getting sick at the wedding. It's like so small. They're
yeah.
tight together. It's like tight.
That
Like their bond
that's a
is tight.
perfect example of like not
Yeah,
cutting. It was just that one
yeah.
shot, like pretty much the entire scene, if not the entire scene.
Which is also too almost reminiscent of like a home video. You know, you
Hmm.
don't cut in a home video, so it's like adds to this
Yeah,
family feel for the movie.
it's definitely a conscious decision too. You know,
It draws
to
you in and makes you feel like a member of the family, which
well,
was a big draw of
you know what it really
the
does?
brothers.
It puts more pressure on the actors to do an even better job because when they're going through these big scenes, like you said, like in the bathroom, or there's right after all the three brothers were fighting in the rink and stuff, and then the dad gets up on the mic, it's just a one shot of them all zooming in very, very slow. And he's talking, you know, for, I don't know, a full minute, you know, and like you, there's no cut. So you can't hide not knowing all of the lines, you know, and
Yeah.
it just brings you to that environment. It's like you're sitting in the stands.
Dude, Zac Efron is acting so well in that scene too, and he's a complete background character because
Yeah.
the focus is on the dad Fritz giving that speech, and the dad's announcing David's like gonna go to Japan and go for the shot at the title, and Zac Efron's in the background hearing this for the first time. You could see disappointment on his
I
face, but you
think
could,
that's like the first spot they cut, you know, is
yeah,
like, I think he messed up. And it's like, no, dad doesn't make mistakes like that.
yeah. But the thing too is he's not just portraying disappointment. He's got to hide it because he's giving a performance. He's still on the stage on the
Yeah.
ring. He's
And
still performing.
they're also pretending to not be tired, but showing that they're tired. Like it's very well done.
Yeah.
It's very well done.
Oh man, it's but the familiar nature of the movie I think is so cool, and that ties in with the shots, the story, the acting. The documentary, I'm gonna reference it again. You can find this on YouTube. The
Yeah.
Vice
Watch it.
yeah,
It was really
it's a
good.
little 45-minute documentary on the Von Erich family. But they say how one of the biggest appeals to this family was that they were like Texas born, all American, like, and they were a family that you felt like a lot of people in Texas felt like they were parents to these boys, like young boys that seemed like good and moral. Am I developing like a Texas accent as I say this?
I don't
Like a
know.
Southern accent, but
Yeehaw.
but they were saying that like, and there's even a cutaway in the documentary to this lady who's like, yeah, this are good boys. Like everyone feels like they're part of the family, and the movie does the same thing, which I feel like was important for the movie to actually work to do that. You
Yeah.
know, for us to like them and care about them to then feel the devastation of the loss.
Absolutely. Our next category, Andrew, is sound design. This includes the score, the soundtrack, and also like all the sound effects that you hear, the Foley work, you know, the punches landing, the creaks of the mat as they're wrestling, you know, the sounds of the
The
car.
ropes on the
Yeah.
reverb of the rope.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff is included in this, basically everything you hear. This is also out of 10 points. What did you give this one?
Give it a 7.5.
Okay, I give it a 7.
Okay.
And I feel like I had it as a 7. This is my lowest score. Everything else has been 8s up until now for me. Um, I feel like this one's a notch down, maybe because this is the longest that we've gone from watching the movie to doing a review. It's been, what, 2 weeks since I've seen it? Probably
Longer.
4 weeks since you've seen
Yeah.
it, somewhere around there. So the sound design, just when I was rating it, didn't stick out to me as much as the other elements, but it definitely didn't hinder any part of the movie at all.
Yeah.
You know, like it did its job. It did its job really well. It just it wasn't at the next level where I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that was amazing.
I think they killed it in that the some of the main aspects you talked about in terms of like the Foley work is incredible in this movie. It like you said, it's hard to do stuff like that. So all
Hmm.
the props off to that. Uh, the the songs used in the movie, the soundtrack are great because it harkens back to that era. It ties you into the era of the 80s. They use 80s music throughout the movie.
Yep. That
But
that opening song, I forget the name of it, but
the
that
one
was
with
actually their opening song
oh
too.
yeah.
So that's cool.
I think they play a good 80s song too when they're like cutting through some of the time period kind of things to get you
Hmm.
into the feel of that era.
Yep.
But the to me, I just give a lot of weight to like an original score, and I
Hmm.
didn't feel like a super memorable original score from the movie in particular, and that's the only reason I wouldn't rank it higher.
Yeah. Ready to go on in our next category?
Yeah.
We're almost all the way through all of our ratings, and then we'll kind of go into breaking down the stories of what happened in real life versus the movie. But our next category is set and character design. So this is different from cinematography because this is like the actual environments that they're choosing to shoot in. This is the clothes that they're choosing to wear and all that stuff that goes into designing the locations and costumes that everyone is wearing. So this we give 5 points is the max. So what did you give this category, Andrew?
For second character design, I gave it 4 out of 5.
I was at a 3.5.
I've been 0.5 ahead of you on everything since the first one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. I think they did a great job, of capturing the time period. I really enjoyed like again we talked about like the scale of the fights, in the arena versus the closeness of when we're at the house or just around town, like, or at that party that they went to, like, um but yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was solid.
I always love, and we talk about this with Air too. I always love when a movie that's like you can call it a period piece, even though it's only like 40 years ago, but it's a period
It's a
piece
long time.
in the 80s. I love the attention to detail that has to go into that. And it's a
Hmm.
lot of effort for the people who made the movie. I mean, they
Absolutely.
talk about an Air, like they changed out a bunch of license plates to fit the time period. Like every car in the movie's got to be
You gave this a 4?
yeah.
Yeah.
You can't have a car that came out in the 90s, so every car in the movie's got to be from the 80s. Changing license plates on those vehicles, the clothing, the branding. If there's a Pepsi, it's got to look like a Pepsi from the 80s. It's obviously logos and brands change a lot, whether it be all the
Yeah.
clothing. And then you've got to have everybody with in this movie has a unique hairstyle that's more fitting to the time period. Very not common in today's time period, some of these hairstyles. Um, but
Which all the boys were wearing a wig except Jeremy Allen White. He actually grew his hair out
oh man, good for
and
him,
wore his
dude.
hair like that.
Yeah, I thought that they all looked really cool. I mean, there's been some people giving them a hard time for some of the hairstyles, but I think that the hairstyles were great. The clothing was cool because I like it because it's unique. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's not what you see every day. They're wearing cutoffs. They're wearing like shirts with netting tank tops Zac Efron wears at one point. So I just really liked all the attention to detail, and that's why it's a 4 out of 5 for me. And then the set design is really cool. Like the house is incredible. I think their real house was smaller because Kevin called it a shack. He said in the documentary, he said they lived on 16 acres in like a little shack while their dad was wrestling. But it's just like a beautiful little piece of nature where it's like an island where their family is it's just them and the rest of the world doesn't exist on all this property. So I thought that was a really cool set piece, so much of the movie taking place there. And then the ring is the other big set piece, the WCCW ring. Like, man, did that look cool, especially that shot I talked about where it's in black and gray and everything's empty and it's just like this arena, this shrine, this like place that means everything to them. I think they call it the Sportatorium. I thought that set was really cool and had to be because a lot of the movie takes place there.
Absolutely. Our last category, Andrew, is rewatchability. This is important when it comes to a movie. Like if the more times you want to watch a movie is the better the movie is to you. So the way we ask this question is if you were asked 5 times and you weren't doing anything else, it was either you do nothing or you watch this movie. How many of those 5 times would you say yes to watching The Iron Claw?
Especially because of the fact that the person acting that asking that would have to hear me say, "No way, you also like Iron Claw?" I would give it a 4 out of 5 also.
Nice. I gave it a 3 out of 5, which I feel like after talking about it for the last, 40 minutes or so, I could sneak it up to a 3.5 or a 4, but I made my bed. I'm going to lay in it.
Made your ring.
Yeah, that's
Gonna-
right. But yeah, I really enjoyed, definitely more than half of the time I would want to watch this movie. Like you said, it stuck with me. And it's not easy for movies or stories in general to do that. You know, like you can have a good time with it, but then maybe you don't think about it that much. You know, there's probably only a handful of movies that you are constantly thinking about after you watch. And this is one of those movies, you know, they balanced the tragedy versus the life lessons versus the hope, you know, and happiness and what what happens with like fame, but then what's the positive of that, but then also what's the negative of that. There's a lot of aspects to the story to ponder and think about after the fact. And then since it's real, right away I wanted to learn more and more about the family. So I watched the documentary, I watched behind the scenes of the movie, and I was excited to do so, you know, to see how the actors got into character, what they did to learn the different moves or encapsulate the feelings that the family was going through in certain times. And yeah, the story stuck with me.
Yeah, I think that I probably would have given it honestly a 3 or even a 2.5 before the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie. And then the last 10 minutes of the movie happened and rocketed up to a 4 for me because I'd go through all of this again just to get to that like
Yeah,
that
it's
feeling at the end.
you probably say that because you enjoyed the movie, but then at the end you couldn't see the movie that well because your eyes were full of tears. So you'd want to rewatch it in hopes to not cry so you could see the movie.
Have to watch it 4 times just to get myself under control. No, I think that, like I said, it's one of the best movie endings that I can remember seeing in a while. And
Yeah.
I think I left the theater talking to my fiance about how the endings of movies are so important. And I think the ending is probably the most common place where movies lose people, or the most likely place for a movie to really like dovetail for somebody's opinion of the movie, you know?
Hmm.
Because the very end of the movie is your last thought of the movie, and that makes it the
Yeah.
most powerful thing for controlling your opinion when you leave that theater. If you like 90% of the movie and the last 10% sucked, what are people going to say? They're going to walk out, turn to their friends, and be like, "Man, that movie they biffed it. The end of that movie was bad. It was great, and they ruined it."
That's what happened a lot with Leave the World Behind. You know, it had
A lot of people said that.
yeah, a lot of people didn't like the ending, and that in return, a lot of people said that they didn't like the movie.
Yeah,
You know, like you said, ending's important.
it's such a valuable thing. And my favorite movie of all time, The Dark Knight, to me, partially is my favorite because to me it's the best movie ending of all time, and it just gets me like rocketing out of my chair and excited. Whereas this movie like makes me feel emotional. So I think that the value of that can't be overstated. Like an incredible ending can make or break a movie.
I
We should do a
agree.
draft on the best movie endings at some point.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Best movie endings, openings. You
Yeah,
know.
we gotta write that down so
Yeah.
we don't forget. Um, okay, let's kind of move on. Oh, your overall
Total
score.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my total score was an 8.2, which just comes in zero point 0.1 above IMDb's score right now.
nice. Mine is mine wrong? Mine's a 7.4.
It doesn't sound that wrong because
But
you were always below me by a little bit.
yeah, that this is one of the few times where I've written down the score and I was like, ooh, that's quite a few points lower than what I would have written it as if we didn't have these categories. You know, I would have probably been right around where you're at, like an
Yeah.
8 to an 8.3 or even a 4. Like I thought the movie was great, but just the different aspects of the movie kind of brought the score down just a little bit for me, but
It's the areas
solid movie.
that you and I rate the highest, you gave high scores.
Yeah.
Like story, cinematography.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so now we can move on. Oops.
New mic placement.
Yeah. Now we can move on to our source code. Bum. This is where we talk about the original source material for whatever movie, story, comic we're talking about for the day. And this movie, like we've said a number of times, is based on true story. And a lot of the things that happen in the movie are true. A lot of things maybe were expanded on or even brought down a little bit, tamed a little bit. And I think the first place to start is the biggest difference between real life and the movie, and that is that there was another brother that wasn't mentioned or featured in the movie at all. His name was Chris. Uh, he was the fifth brother.
Sixth.
He was the youngest.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So he wasn't mentioned at all in the movie, and the reason for that is that the director and whatnot, they were saying that it made the movie too long and maybe like unbelievable. You
Mhm.
know, that like yet another brother passed away.
Yeah.
And you're right, or he's right. Like it does sound unbelievable, but unfortunately it actually happened that way. The younger brother did pass away.
Yeah, so the story with Chris Von Erich is that he was kind of the runt of the Von Erich family in the sense that he was, different reports have him at 5'4", 5'5".
Much shorter,
He
yeah.
was much shorter than the average of the other
Couldn't
brothers.
put on weight
He
as
was
easily.
he was asthmatic, and due to using an inhaler for a long period of time, which is technically a steroid, it weakened his bones. So he also had brittle bones that could easily be damaged in the ring. He was easily injured. He wasn't as strong or as athletic as the other brothers. But he was really close with his older brother Mike, who was, the fifth out of the six brothers, and he took it really hard when Mike died. And then after attempting a wrestling career, Chris did not do very well. The depression coupled between those two things of losing his older brother to suicide and not performing very well in wrestling, he committed suicide, unfortunately, with a handgun. And so the director and writer Sean Durkin, feeling that those stories were just too similar and too much for the audience to be put through again on repeat, I believe they went with the idea of kind of melding some elements of Chris's story in with Mike's story. So the actor Simmons, who plays Mike, is meant to portray some of the elements of the younger brother Chris as well, and kind of create those two stories as one. Because initially, when I heard that story too, I was shocked. I was like,
There's another
it's
one.
unbelievable that not only that
Yeah.
this happened again, but it's also unbelievable that it was omitted from the movie. Because if I was Kevin and have one of my brothers not included in the story, I would kind of, it would make me feel a little bit upset.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie is, from what I've heard, is blessed by Kevin. It has his approval. So um, I I think that he understands that certain concessions have to be made. This is not going to be one for one story when it's adapted for Hollywood. They're usually based on true events or inspired by true events, and not necessarily like, it'd be a
It's
documentary if
Yeah,
it
I was gonna
was.
say it's not a documentary.
Yeah.
It's meant to kind of entertain and explain the story, but to take creative control over it a little bit too, you know.
And I think when he died, he was 21 years old. Yeah, he was 21 years old, which is horrific and sad as well. So young.
So Fritz, the father, did start out as the wrestler, and he did make that move, the Iron Claw, where he takes his hands and basically just smashes the temples of his opponent. And they did live in the RV, you know, like he did buy a car randomly when they couldn't necessarily afford it. Um, and he played this villainous character in the wrestling ring,
Omitted from the movie.
omitted from the
I think
movie because it
intelligently.
was too much, and it's probably a good thing. You know how you said like in the beginning how he didn't seem very villainous. Well, if they put this in, like he would have clearly been like the bad guy. You know, there wouldn't have been very much redeeming aspects of him. I feel like in the movie's standpoint, at the least, but he's a wrestler and he wanted to. What better way to capture people's attention than to be the villain
And
in his eyes?
and then he was thinking, what's the worst thing I could be?
A Nazi. What can't doesn't get any worse than that. So he made up this Nazi persona and became the villain, and that's kind of how he grew in the beginning, you know?
Yeah, in the NWA. And he did eventually become, I believe, a heavyweight champion, but he didn't become like the heavyweight national champion like he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to. It's so ironic that he was considered one of the most hated heels or villains in all of wrestling. and then they would turn around, move to Texas, and raise his boys in the WCCW as kind of like the shrine of like morality and like Christian, all-American, Texas-born, like raise them as these like incredible heroes of wrestling that
All is forgiven.
everyone saw them as virtuous, right? So
Yeah.
very ironic.
But that time when they were living with the RV, this is where the first son passed away in a freak accident. He was young. I'm not sure how old.
6 years old.
Yeah.
Jack Jr.
He passed away by getting like electrocuted or something by the RV, and then he fell into the snow and ended up drowning.
Yeah, he was walking home from school. He
Yeah.
stepped on the trailer tongue, it was called. I don't know what that is, but it electrocuted him and drowned in the. What a crazy freak accident! Because and this is a big question I wanted to ask you going into this too, is and I haven't brought it up before filming. I do not believe in curses, but as you watch this as a true story, it becomes harder and harder to believe that this family isn't cursed as events continue to transpire. What do you think about the concept of a curse and the Von Erich curse in specificity?
I mean, it feels real, right?
It feels hard to deny.
Yeah.
It feels hard to deny, and I don't believe in this.
Is it because
but
is it because he willingly chose to be a Nazi when he didn't have to? Maybe.
that seems, man, what a bad decision, honestly.
Yeah.
Like that.
But no, even before, there was like tragedy in his grandparents.
Oh, I don't know this.
Yeah, they're like, they took the Von Erich name or whatever from like, think the dad's grandma's side or mom's side or something. But like tragedy happened with that name and stuff, but they went with it.
Yeah, because I think in the movie they said that's where I think it harkened back to that.
Yeah.
I think they mentioned that at one point in the movie. So let's go. I'm gonna go over like a snap list of the tragedies in this family, right? So this is the quick minute version of the Von Erich family curse. So we've got 6 children. So
6 boys.
Fritz and Doris have.
What are
6
the odds
boys,
of that?
right? And then the first boy, Jack, dies of electrocution and subsequent drowning at 6 years old.
1959.
And then following that, the next child to die is David, now the second oldest, now that Jack has passed away. David dies in Japan of acute enteritis, which there are conspiracy theories that he died of drug overdose and that the wrestler who found him hid the drugs, so that wouldn't. But the release from the Japanese press was officially that it was acute enteritis, so that's the story.
That happened in 1984.
Even if much of the wrestling world believes that it was a drug overdose, and I believe it said Ric Flair said in his autobiographical book that he wrote that it was drug overdose. But
and it was literally right before the title fight that his dad so desperately wanted in the family.
Yeah, but that story is all speculation too, so I wouldn't hold much weight to the drug overdose story. Then the next brother to pass away is Mike. Mike dies from. He's wrestling in Israel. This is really the start of the story. Wrestling in Israel, he gets his shoulder injured, goes in for a routine shoulder surgery, and ends up with complications resulting in toxic shock syndrome, where he's never really the same after this. Kevin in the documentary says that he would have like outbursts, attacking an empty car with nobody in it, attacking like a telephone pole, inanimate object. So he had
that press conference that they did in the hospital or whatnot when in the movie where Mike is talking, he's like, I'll be back in the ring. And then watching the Vice documentary where they show that press conference and he's like, I'll be back. It's like, man, that was hard, to watch and then to see how close to real.
Yeah. Well, a lot of stories
and reality.
A lot of stories, including the movie, say that Mike didn't even really want to wrestle. I mean, I'm sure
the movie portrays that he wants to be a musician.
Yeah, and then one account I saw, it was on Wikipedia, but it said that he wanted to be a cameraman. He wanted to work in the wrestling as a cameraman, and that he didn't want to increase his time in the ring, but that the father pressured him to. And then ultimately he gets injured, leading down to this road where he's got these emotional outbursts after the toxic shock syndrome, and then he eventually commits suicide. And
that was 3 years after David died in 87.
Wow. I mean, in just that 3-year period to lose 2 brothers, it's so gut-wrenching and emotional. But the next brother to pass away is a brother not featured in the movie, Chris Von Erich. Like I mentioned earlier, it's just resulting depression from the failure to live up to the wrestling dreams that were in the family and the loss of his older brother, Mike, who he's very close with. He also shoots himself. I actually... When I say also shoots himself, that's getting into the future. but the method of suicide for Mike was overdose by tranquilizers. Um,
Hmm.
what was the? Do you have the date for Mike?
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, for
This
Chris.
for Chris 4 years after his brother Mike in 91.
Yeah, and Chris is the last brother to pass away, but that's even that. There's other tragedy in the family. I mean,
Chris is not the last brother. There's one more. Carrie.
oh, I didn't write Carrie down on my notes.
Carrie.
Carrie passed away after his brothers are gone. He is heard saying multiple times that he wants to be with his brothers, and he's even heard kind of um, commemorating what Mike and Chris did, saying that it took a lot of courage for them to do what they did in committing suicide, and eventually Carrie commits suicide with the gun that he gave to his father as a Father's Day present. He shoots himself in the heart, and
Yep. Just like in the movie. It wasn't like, I don't think it was right in that spot that they showed that he.
it was in the. I believe the spot they chose was actually where Chris committed
Yeah.
suicide.
That
So
sounds
that's how they melded the story
sounds
together.
right.
'Cause Chris,
Watch the
yeah,
documentary.
Chris committed suicide in the yard, and I
But
think that Carrie committed suicide up on a hill because it was still on the property. But yeah, it's a very complicated
it's
story with a
messy,
lot
yeah.
of tragedies.
But that was 2 years after in 93. And this was after he lost his foot in 86. And like we mentioned earlier, Carrie felt the pressure, whether it was from himself or his dad or a mixture of both, to hide that, and to wrestle with the prosthetic and to not let anyone know.
Which to
Like,
me is also ironic because having this shameful feeling around the amputation, but really shouldn't it be all the more impressive that he's going into the ring
right.
and wrestling
That's what I was thinking. I
with
was
an
like, holy
amputated
crap.
leg?
He wrestled for that many years with a amputated leg. Like, that's crazy,
And
isn't it?
it's all the more difficult when you weigh 258, 260 pounds, like
Yeah.
to carry all that weight on a prosthetic and do
And you're
these
like
athletic events.
jumping.
Yeah.
Like your feet, your ankles, your calves are a very valuable part to jumping.
They say that like obviously his athleticism suffered after that injury and it was
Yeah.
obvious in the ring, but
So his motorcycle accident happened later than it was depicted in the film. In the film, he won the title, and then basically that night he went for a motorcycle drive. He was a little drunk, got into an accident, and then lost his foot. But it was actually, I think, maybe 3 years
years.
later that accident actually occurred.
Also a detail not seen in the movie is that he crashed into the back of a parked police car.
Oh,
And
jeez.
then he was brought up on drug charges and was fearing for going to prison. And all of these things together, feeling presumably like his life was crashing down around him. I mean, he was married with children too. So all of these difficulties going on, he succumbed to the depression and committed suicide.
It was also interesting too. He did wrestle in the WWE, I believe, but it was under a different name. It
The
wasn't
Texas
even.
Tornado.
Yeah, it wasn't even Von Erich. Which
I have all the brothers' ring monikers here. So Kevin was known as the Golden Warrior. David Von Erich known as the Yellow Rose of Texas. Kerry Von Erich was known by the Modern Day Warrior, but also the Texas Tornado when he went to the WWE. And then Mike was also known as the Inspirational Warrior.
interesting. One thing that was very interesting to me that happened in both the movie and real life was when Kevin kind of lost control and was in the ring and got Ric Flair right in the Iron Claw and wouldn't let go.
It cost him the title because he got disqualified.
Yeah, and it was crazy because in the film it's like, oh my gosh, this is going on forever. Why isn't anyone like pulling him off? Like just grab him.
Yeah.
And then in the documentary, they show the same clip of it actually happening. It's like, Jesus, like,
No one stopped.
that's actually how it seemed to go down, like based off of those two clips. Like it seemed like that's a very realistic depiction of how that fight ended up going, which is crazy.
What a crazy tragedy. Honestly, just talking about it all back to back right now, it's like I feel sad again. Like,
Yeah, so like,
it's you know,
how do we take this tragedy and do what the movie did and turn it into something positive and hopeful to end our
I have
podcast?
some kind of fun stuff here that are just differences from the movie and reality. I know we talked about some of them already, but here's like some other minute details that were changed. You want to go over that
Yes,
in the
please.
hopes that
Just let me wipe my tears real quick.
so obviously I already talked about how Kevin seems to have more respect for his father in real life, and that's another tragedy that I forgot that I feel like deserves to be mentioned in this episode. But the father, Fritz von Erich, actually passed away from lung cancer that had spread to his brain. You saw this in the documentary where he had brain cancer and was talking to Kevin, telling him horrible things, and that Kevin attributed to the brain cancer affecting his mind. But yeah, he passed away as well. I think in his 60s, maybe 69, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So much for that family to go through, but other details that changed from the movie or from reality to the movie as well. Mike started wrestling before David's death, not because of David's death. So wrestling
Yep.
obviously just being in the family. In real life, there was a fake brother that was added to the
Yeah.
roster. You
Wasn't
heard
that
about this?
crazy?
Yeah. So they added a brother after David passed, I believe, to fill in and join in on their Von Erich team.
Kind of backfired a little bit.
Yeah, it backfired because Kevin and Carrie were against it, probably for multiple reasons. Probably because
Yeah,
they didn't want to replace their brother who had passed away, and
sure.
Kevin said they didn't want to lie to their fans either because they had always been truthful with them, and fans could tell, even though he was a lookalike to them, fans could tell that he wasn't a real Von Erich, and they
Mm-hmm.
didn't appreciate kind of being lied to in that sense, and that was kind of one of the early downtrends to their career because they have this downtrend in the late 80s or past 85. They started to have a downtrend where they're seen as these, holy and Christian and virtuous boys, but they're obviously having some trouble with the law at some points and some of them being involved with drugs, and then the stories of suicide as well. That has its implications for the Christian faith also. So in some sense, Texas or the fans started to turn away from them a little bit in that time period. Um, but then we've got that. I already mentioned that Carrie crashed into the back of a police car, and that he was being brought up on drug charges. It's kind of nice, I think, in a sense that the movie it doesn't go into detail more than it needs to. It also doesn't hold back on some of that. I mean, it shows them doing drugs and drinking and the party lifestyle that I'm sure came with it in a sense of realism, but there isn't a need to drag the name of some of these people through the mud who have gone through so much also. So I think the movie tempers that line really well while still being faithful. Um, let's see. Oh, and then you brought up one of my other details as well, Carrie. The 2 year time period difference with the
motorcycle
motorcycle
accident.
accident.
Yeah.
And my last one here is I have the heights for the three or for the four main brothers that wrestled, and then the height of the actors. And
Oh, yeah.
we'll see how far off they were. So I didn't want the weight for the actors. I think is a lot of speculation, so I didn't use the weight because
Sure.
you look up Zac Efron's weight, it says 165. There's no way he's
Not
165
in this movie.
in this movie.
Nope.
Maybe in like 17 again or Neighbors or something.
Yeah.
But so Carrie, the biggest of the Von Erichs, he is 6'2", coming in at 260 pounds. Jeremy Allen White, who plays him, how tall would you say he is?
He's like what, 5'8", 5'9"?
5'7".
5'7", yeah.
Considerable difference in height and mass. Kevin Von Erich was 6'2" and an impressive 600 or 240 pounds. Where'd I get the 6 from? He's 6'2".
He's a super wrestler.
No, he's Hulk. No, so he's Kevin Von Erich,
240?
6'2", 240. Huge.
Dang.
And Zac Efron, we know, he's 5'8".
Yeah.
Considerably shorter. And then David was the tallest of the brothers. He was 6'8", 230 pounds.
Jeez.
Played by Harris Dickinson, who is the tallest
And
of the actors. But
he weighed that much less than the other brothers?
Yeah, dude, that's how
crazy.
That's how stacked
they
Carrie
were.
was.
Yeah.
Carrie was a muscular
Monster.
beast. I think that's why he was so popular in the ring and why he had the biggest, most successful wrestling career out of the brothers and going on to the WWE and everything.
And he was the one that was going to make it to the Olympics.
Yeah, well, because just he was
He was
athletic
him. He was
monster.
him.
Yeah, he was literally him. So Harris Dickinson being the tallest, of the actors, he's 6'2". He's the height of the shortest of the other brothers. And then Mike was 6'2" and 238 pounds. And
Jeez.
I couldn't find Simmons's
Yeah.
his height. I couldn't find it in a Google search, but there is obviously a big difference.
Dang. In comparison, I'm 6 foot, 205 pounds, and you're what? Just shy of 6?
5'11", 185.
Yeah. Those are big guys. They're huge, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Dude, Texas Tornado.
That's right.
He's a monster. He's huge.
That's right. All right.
Still, though, credits where credits due to the actors who put on a lot of muscle for the role.
It's definitely convincing that they could do and did a lot of their stuff.
Movies are about looking big, not being huge.
Yeah, right.
We can't all be Alan Richardson.
Right. Facts.
He would have been a good cast, but he's just a little too old for the age they had the brothers.
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been interesting. He's definitely too old for sure. I think the actors did a fantastic job though.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't change him out.
No.
For something frivolous like that. You know, it's a big part of who these people are in real life is how big they were. It's a big part of their persona and their wrestling, but it wasn't absolutely critical to the movie that they be these, they don't have to be as big as wrestlers.
So that kind of wraps up our movie review of The Iron Claw. This movie, highly recommended. If you haven't seen it, go see it. If you have seen it, great.
Let
us know in the comments how you liked the movie, what you thought of the podcast, which category of our 6 categories is your favorite that you would give the highest rating to. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. We have our Discord link in the description, and you can also check out some of our merch. We have our shirts and stuff. We have our short film coming out eventually. It'll be here soon. But no, at the end of January, we're hoping to submit it to short films. So
festival.
Short film festival. So hopefully we'll be able to get that done on time to where we can submit it to there. And then we just have to look up the rules to see if we can post it before it airs at the festival, which will be in summertime. So definitely sometime in the next few months. We have another few projects in mind for this year, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. We post full episodes like this one every Monday and Thursday, so you can be sure to check us out on those days. But then we're also on shows.
Then we're also on
social media. My brain was trying to remember all the social media accounts that we're on at the same time.
Instagram, TikTok,
YouTube,
YouTube, all of them. X/Twitter.
Yeah, don't go there. We're not.
Don't even bother.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment down below, and we'll see you on the next one. And that's a wrap.
Oh wait, we didn't wrestle.
Oh no!